In early 2018, a long-winded divorce case finished with me retaining residency of my 11-year-old son. I assumed myself and the father would share a positive approach to co-parenting. However, the father was from another country and had returned to live in his country of origin. Recognising the potential for international abduction, the court took the caution of granting me sole parental rights regarding the holding of my son's passport. In particular, this meant I always accompanied my son on his visits to see his father abroad, though the father was at liberty to visit his son in the UK whenever he wished. Although the father seemed to have absorbed this deep disappointment, in hindsight it is now obvious that the court case heightened his resentment to me and made him determined to reverse the decision by application through the court in 2020. In the lead up to this, he persevered with a relentless 2-year campaign to discredit me covertly by undermining my son's attachment to me to the point that it was wholly contemptuous. My son's behaviour became more wayward. Initially, the schools, police, and indeed myself attributed this to nothing more than the usual adolescent adjustment. It took a few months to realise that something much more menacing was at play. The alienation strategies employed by the father involved persuading my son to switch from a fee-paying school to a state school where he didn't know anyone. This isolated my son from his peer group. Without informing me, his father transferred £300 a month into his bank account, a ploy to win him over that backfired when my son used the money for inappropriate and unhealthy purposes. I only found out about this because of the court order that was granted me parental authority over the mobile phone. The father even manipulated my son to use his mobile phone like a spying device on me in my own home. This developmental skewing of my son was brought about despite his father not living with him, and indeed mostly not even being in the same country. I was astounded to realise that despite spending £37,000 and all the efforts involved in the first court application, barely 2 years later, I would be required to find similar amounts of money and energy if I was to have any chance of remaining the primary residential parent. The first quarter really didn't mean very much at all. The role played by the Kafkas worker in this case was especially concerning. She only spoke to me for a total of 8 minutes on WhatsApp to help her prepare for material for a report. She never visited us at home, met my son, or visited his schools. The Kafkas officer, along with social workers, showed a naive disdain for the notion of parental alienation. They played an enabling role in bringing it about, and no role whatsoever in the eventual thwarting of the strategy. On top of that, the judges proved particularly inconsistent, perhaps confusing external obstruction with the internal psychological processes that follow discrete coercion to a loyalty bind, fueled by disinformation about the non-alienating parent. The whole experience was like walking on glass.